Go to your closet right now, and I will wager you can find within a minute 3 or 4 things you have stopped wearing for the smallest of reasons. A shirt with a missing button, trousers with a split seam, a sock with a hole in the heel, a sweater with a snag. Things that are perfectly good, but for one small failure, set aside, on their way to the rag bag or the trash, soon to be replaced with money out of your pocket. I am going to show you today the lost skill that brings every one of those back to life in a few minutes with a needle and thread, the simple mending our grandmothers all knew, and that has been near forgotten in a single generation. And I am going to tell you plainly why it was forgotten. Because there is a whole industry that depends on you throwing those clothes away. Here's the truth about your clothes that the stores would rather you not think about. A garment does not wear out all at once. It fails at one small point first. A button pops, a seam gives, a hole opens at the heel or the elbow where the rubbing is hardest, while all the rest of it is still sound, still good for years of wear. In times past, everyone knew this, and everyone knew how to fix that one small failure, so a good garment lasted not a season, but a decade or more, mended and handed down. But somewhere along the way, clothes got cheap, cheaply made to fail soon and cheap to replace, and a whole way of thinking was sold to us, that when a thing tears, you throw it out and buy new, that mending is for the poor, that your time is too valuable and the new shirt too cheap to bother. And so a skill that every child once learned was let slip away in about one generation, and now grown people stand helpless before a missing button. That forgetting did not happen by accident. A people who mend their clothes buy far fewer clothes. My name is Eli Zook. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We make much of our own clothing, plain and sturdy, and we mend it, all of us, until it truly cannot be mended. And then the cloth becomes a quilt or a rag and serves still longer. Nothing good is thrown away for a small failure. A pair of work trousers in this house may last 10 years and more, patched at the knee, reinforced at the seam, the buttons replaced as they go. I am going to show you the few simple mends that will save most of what you would otherwise throw away, and you do not need to be a tailor to do a single one of them. I am going to show you 4 things: how to sew on a button, how to mend a split seam, how to patch a hole, and how to darn a sock, which are the 4 mends that handle the great majority of what goes wrong with clothes. I will walk you through each slow and plain in words so you can do them with your hands. And I am going to be honest that mending is a skill that takes a little practice, that your first button will not be as neat as your 10th, but that all of it is well within any person's reach. There is also one trick, one thing about where and how clothes fail that lets you stop the failure before it happens and make a garment last for years, and almost nobody is taught it. Stay for that part especially. Here is what you need, and it is the cheapest kit there is. You need needles, a packet of assorted sewing needles, $1 or $2, lasting a lifetime. You need thread in a few common colors to match your clothes, black and white, and a brown and a blue. A few dollars and it lasts for years. You need a small pair of scissors. You need a few buttons saved in a jar, as folk always kept a button jar. For darning socks, it helps to have a darning egg. A smooth, egg-shaped piece of wood you slip inside the sock to hold it round. But a smooth stone, a light bulb, or a small ball does the same for nothing. And you want some scraps of fabric for patches, which you save from worn-out clothes too far gone to mend. Needles, thread, scissors, a button jar, scraps, a whole mending kit for a few dollars once, and it serves for life. Now, here is the trick I promised, the one that saves the most clothing of all. So listen close, because it is about preventing the failure, not just fixing it. Clothes nearly always fail first at the points of greatest stress and rubbing, the same places every time. The seams under the arms and in the seat of the trousers, the knees and elbows, the heels and toes of socks, the buttonholes. And here is the secret. You can reinforce those points before they fail. A new pair of work trousers, before you ever wear them hard, can have the stress seams gone over with a second line of stitching to make them near unbreakable. The knees can be reinforced from the inside with a patch before a hole ever opens. A button can be re-sewn good and tight the day you buy the garment before it pops. A few minutes of reinforcing a new garment at the points you know will fail can double or triple its life. The old folks did this without thinking. They reinforced the wear points of new clothes as a matter of course. So the greatest mending trick of all is to mend before the break. Strengthen the stress points first, and the failure never comes. Prevent, do not just repair. That is the secret that makes clothes last for years. So here is how you do the 4 mends. First, the button, the simplest and most useful. You thread your needle and tie a knot in the end of a good length of thread doubled over. You bring the needle up from the underside of the cloth where the button goes, through one hole of the button, down through the hole across from it, and through the cloth, and up again several times through the holes, building up the thread that holds it. And here is the small trick. Lay a pin or a matchstick across the top of the button under the thread as you sew, so the button is not sewn down too tight and has a little room to sit in the buttonhole. Pull the pin out at the end, wind the loose thread around underneath the button a few times to make a little neck, and knot it off. A button sewn this way holds far better than the loose factory button that popped. That one mend alone will rescue more clothes than any other. Second, the split seam, the most common failure and one of the easiest fixes, for a split seam is just thread that has given way along a line the garment was already sewn on. You turn the garment inside out, line up the 2 edges of the split as they were meant to be, and sew along the old seam line with small running stitches. Needle in and out, small and even, going a little past each end of the split into the sound seam so it does not pull open again, and knot it well at both ends. A seam mended this way is as good as new and often stronger. Turn it right side out and no one will ever see it. Third, the patch for a hole or a worn-through spot, as at a knee or an elbow. You cut a piece of your scrap fabric a bit larger than the hole all around. For a sturdy mend, you can lay the patch behind the hole on the inside and stitch around the edge of the hole and through the patch so the patch backs the weak spot, or lay it over the top and stitch its edges down. Turn the raw edges of the patch under so they do not fray. On work clothes, a patch need not be pretty, only strong. On better clothes, you choose a matching cloth and small, neat stitches, and it is hardly seen. A patched knee will outlast the rest of the trousers. Fourth, darning a sock, which seems the most mysterious, but is only weaving. You slip your darning egg or a smooth stone or a light bulb inside the sock, under the hole to hold it round and firm. Then you sew a square of running stitches around the hole on the sound cloth to anchor it. Then you lay a row of threads straight across the hole, back and forth, like the strings of a little loom anchored in the good cloth on each side. Then you weave threads the other way, over and under, through those first threads, back and forth, filling in the hole with a little woven patch of thread. It is just over and under weaving. And when the hole is filled with this woven thread, you knot it off, and the sock is whole and wearable again. Your first darn will be lumpy. Your 10th will be smooth. It is a satisfying thing once you have the way of it. Now I have to be honest, as I always am, though here the cautions are small. Mending takes a little practice. Your first attempts will be clumsy, and that is no failure, it is learning. So practice first on a rag or an old garment you do not mind. Mind the needle, for it is sharp, and keep needles and pins well away from small children and counted carefully, so none is lost in a chair or a carpet. And know that not everything can be saved. Cloth that has gone thin and rotten all over, worn through in many places, is at the end of its life, and then you do not fight it, but turn it to rags or quilt scraps, which is its own kind of thrift. But the great majority of what folks throw away has one small failure and years of wear left in it, and that you can save. Let me give you the troubleshooting. If your button pops again, you sewed it too loose or did not knot it well. Sew it firm with a little thread neck and a good knot. If your seam splits again, you did not carry the stitches far enough into the sound seam on each side. Go past the split next time and anchor well. If your patch pulls loose, the stitches were too few or too near the frayed edge, stitch into sound cloth all around. If your darn wears through, it was too loose a weave. Weave it closer and fuller. Nearly every mend that fails was rushed. Go slow, anchor well, and it holds. Let me say more about the thread and the small knowledge that makes a mend hold. For these little things are the difference between a mend that lasts and one that fails in a week. Match your thread to your cloth as best you can. A strong thread for strong cloth, and a color near to the garment so the mend hides. For most mends, you use the thread doubled, threaded through the needle and the two ends knotted together, which gives you a strong double strand. Start with a good knot the thread will not pull through, and end with a good knot too. To finish, take 2 or 3 tiny stitches in the same spot, or loop the needle through a stitch and pull it tight into a knot, so your work cannot unravel. Keep your stitches small and even, for small stitches are stronger and neater than big loose ones. And do not pull so tight that you pucker the cloth, nor leave it so loose it gapes. Snug and even is the aim. These are small things, but they are the whole craft. Good thread, doubled, knotted firm at both ends, small, even stitches, snug, but not puckered. Learn that much, and you can mend near anything. Let me give you fuller help on each of the 4 mends, beginning with the running stitch, for it is the foundation of nearly all of them. The running stitch is simply the needle going in and out of the cloth in a straight line. Down through, up through, down through, up through, making a row of even stitches like a dashed line. It is the stitch for mending seams and for tacking a patch, and once your hand knows it, you can sew. For a stronger seam that will not pull open, there is the back stitch, where each stitch reaches back to meet the last, leaving no gaps, a solid, strong line of stitching, best for seams that take strain, like the seat of trousers or under an arm. So, running stitch for general work, back stitch where strength matters most. With just those 2 stitches, you can sew on buttons, close seams, anchor patches, and darn, there is no need for fancy stitches to save a wardrobe. Let me go deeper on the patch, for it is the workhorse of mending, and there is more than one way. The simplest is the patch laid behind the hole on the inside. You cut a piece of sound cloth a good bit larger than the hole all around, lay it behind the damage, and stitch it down all around into the sound cloth surrounding the hole so the patch backs and supports the weak spot. Then you may stitch back and forth across the hole itself to bind the worn edges to the patch beneath. This is strong, and the patch hardly shows from the front. The other way is the patch on top, laid over the hole, its raw edges turned under so they will not fray, stitched down all around. Quicker, more visible, fine for work clothes. For a knee or an elbow that takes hard wear, the inside patch is best and longest lasting. Turn the raw edges under or the patch will fray loose. Stitch into sound cloth, not the worn edge, or your stitches will pull through. A well-patched knee outlasts the rest of the garment, and on work clothes, a patch is a badge of thrift, not shame. Let me give you more on darning, for it is the most useful and most satisfying mend, and the one folks find most mysterious until they see it is only weaving. Picture a hole in the heel of a sock. You slip your darning egg, or a smooth stone, a light bulb, a small ball, inside to hold the heel round and firm so you are not sewing the front and back together. First, anchor the area, sew a few rows of running stitch in the sound cloth all around the hole so your darn has firm ground to hold to. Then lay the warp, rows of straight stitches across the hole one way, from sound cloth on one side to sound cloth on the other, back and forth, close together, like stringing a little loom across the gap. Then weave the weft. Now go the other way, and with the needle, weave over one warp thread and under the next, over and under, all the way across. On the way back, do the opposite. Under where you went over where you went under, just as cloth is woven. Row by row, you fill the hole with a little woven patch of thread, and when it is filled, and you have woven a bit into the sound cloth all around, you knot off underneath. Your first darn will be lumpy, and your 10th will be smooth and near invisible. It is a skill of the hand that comes with a little practice. It is only over and under weaving, and there is deep satisfaction in making a holy sock whole again with nothing but thread. Let me say a word about the worth of all this, for it is more than saving a few dollars on a shirt. A person who can mend looks at the world differently. A torn thing is not trash, but a small task. A missing button, not a reason to discard a good garment, but a 5-minute fix. Over a life, a family that mends spends a fraction on clothing what a family that discards spends, and that money stays in the family's pocket. But beyond the money there is something else, something the old folks understood, a kind of dignity and care in keeping good things in good repair, in not being wasteful, in being able to do for yourself rather than running to buy new at every small failure. There is a quiet competence in it, and a freedom from the throwaway churn that keeps so many always buying. A mended garment, cared for and made to last, is a small act of independence, and it is a skill you can teach your children, as it was once taught to every child, so that they too need not stand helpless before a popped button. Now, I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters. Think about who profits from your clothes failing. The clothing makers learned long ago that there is far more money in clothes that wear out fast and are thrown away than in clothes that last a lifetime. So much is now made cheaply and made to fail, sold cheap so you will not mind buying again, season after season, a new wardrobe every year. And the whole notion that mending is beneath you, that your time is too dear, and the new shirt too cheap to bother, was sold to you on purpose, because a person who mends and reinforces and makes a garment last 10 years buys a tenth of the clothes. There is no profit in teaching a child to sew on a button and darn a sock. Quite the opposite. That child grown will be a poor customer. So a skill every person once had was let slip away in a single generation, not because clothes stopped tearing, but because throwing them away sells more clothes. So here's what I want you to do this week. Get a cheap sewing kit, needles, a few colors of thread, scissors, and a jar for buttons. Go to that pile of set-aside clothes and pick the easiest one, a shirt with a missing button, and sew the button back on with the little neck and a good knot. Then mend a split seam, then try a patch, then darn a sock. Each one saves you the price of a new garment and brings a good thing back to life. And then do the real trick. Reinforce the wear points of something new before it ever fails. Tell me in the comments below. What have you been throwing away for the want of one small mend? And did your grandmother keep a button jar and a darning egg and teach you any of this? I read every single one of these, and the old ways you all share are the reason I keep doing this. Next time, I'm going to show you how this family keeps a knife and a tool sharp and serviceable for a lifetime with nothing but a stone, another skill near lost. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, mend the small failure, reinforce before it breaks, save the good cloth, and remember the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.